Astral Chain has to be one of the most unique games I played in a long while. It came out in 2019, so that's right around when the pandemic started to take off, and I feel a lot of people missed out on Astral Chain. It's one of the most unique action RPG games I've ever played, and it's actually funny that I'm playing it now around the time that Final Fantasy 16 came out. That game has been heavily criticized by leaving behind its RPG roots for a more hack and slash combat system. But if you play something like Astral Chain, this is a perfect example of how to do both at the same time. So first, let's get into combat. You have 5 different legions that you will unlock throughout playing the game, but you start off with your Sword Legion. Each legion has a different playstyle. The Sword Legion to me is the most balanced of each legion. It doesn't do that much damage, but at the same time, its speed and the amount of attacks it can do at once make up for it. The Arrow Legion is all about range and dealing with enemies in the air. It doesn't do that much damage, but it can shoot out multiple different projectiles that can hit multiple enemies at once. The Arm Legion is all about power, but it is kind of slow, and it can do a lot of grapple different moves and can also put enemies in a stun state. The Beast Legion is all about speed. It also can give the player the ability to be basically invincible, because if you ride on top of the Beast Legion, you basically can dodge any move without even trying. And the last legion is the Axe Legion. This is all about defense and can do a lot of heavy damage, although it is the slowest of all legion. Now the cool thing is you're able to control your legions with the Astral Chain. This Astral Chain gimmick is probably the most unique part of the entire experience, as they went all out to show you that this chain could be used in multiple different ways. Sticking to the combat usage only for now, the chain can be used to bind enemies together. So no matter which legion you choose to use, you can bind the enemies together by wrapping the chain around them. This will leave the enemies vulnerable as they can't move for a certain period of time. But this move has its limitations, as you can only do it so many times before the enemies will automatically break out of it. You can also use your Astral Chain to catch enemies in like a clothesline type move. So certain enemies do a charge attack, which the game will indicate with a red beam on the screen, or sometimes they'll do charge attacks without this indication, and these are kind of the ones you have to discover for yourself. But once they charge at you, you can actually clothesline them by stretching the chain out, and it'll send the enemy flying backwards. And as you can imagine, because the legion is attached to you by a chain, you can call the legion back and forth towards you with this chain. This also allows you to attack 2 different enemies at once. So you could basically send your legion to attack one enemy while you deal with another, or keep the legion close to you and you both attack the same enemy at the same time. In Astral Chain, attacking enemies from behind does extra damage, so you can position yourself behind an enemy to do extra damage while your legion is in front of the enemy, distracting them. Or you can even do the reverse, with you being the distraction in the front and your legion the one doing the attacking from behind. Each legion also has a special move that they can do as well. The Sword Legion can do a precision cut, and you can also slow down time while doing this to make it easier. If you ever played Metal Gear Rise or Revengers, this will look very familiar to you, as this is basically Raiden's ability to slow down time and do precision cuts. You're also able to do a precision cut right before an attack hits to do a counter. The Arrow Legion basically puts you in a third-person shooter mode, which allows you to do charged up precision arrow attacks. The Arm Legion allows you to ride inside the suit of armor and do extra damage, and also avoids different types of liquids and fluids on the floor and different types of hazards. The Beast Legion lets you ride on top of it and allows you to dodge different types of moves automatically, as I mentioned before. You can also do an attack on top of the Beast Legion, kind of like similar riding a horse or something, but it's not that much damage that comes from this. And the Axe Legion is all about defense. So when you're doing his special move, he'll guard you and take all the damage for you basically. But if you attack with him, he'll do a heavy hitting attack that typically will break an enemy's shield. Each legion also has different movement speeds as well, the Axe Legion being the slowest of them all, and the Beast Legion being the fastest. There's other things you can do with your Astral Chain as well, such as the ability to do jump attacks. Jump attacks are kind of unique in this game because there's no actual jump button per se. What you can do to get in the air is send your legion towards an enemy that's already floating in the air. Each legion can kind of hover in the air for a little while. So while the legion's in the air, if you then attack while holding on to the chain, you'll be thrown into the air to do aerial attacks. You can also wrap enemies around each other and do a jump attack that way too. This is a bit different than the bind, as you're not going to completely wrap the chain around all of them so that they get all stuck. Instead, what you'll do is wrap the chain around multiple different enemies and then press the attack button, and your character will kind of fly through the air and bounce off each enemy, kicking them away. This is good for making room for yourself and your legion. I can't stress how cool this chain gimmick is. I know the word gimmick is often used in a negative connotation, but I'm not using it negatively here. I'm just using it as it's meant to be used, meaning it's something unique or special that sells you on the idea. The developers really sat back and said, hey, we're gonna have this chain, so let's use it in as many different ways as possible that we can come up with. And they really went all out, in my opinion. It's the main thing that takes this game and puts it in its own special category. Plenty games have different modes where you can control 2 different characters at once, but this one feels different to me based upon the chain alone. Now, we're not done with combat just yet. I need to go over how combat actually works in this game. Now, unlike other hack and slash games, this game really only uses one button for your character to attack with. There are other moves you can unlock, but there are not that many compared to most hack and slash games. There is a thrust attack you can unlock, which sends your character forward or in any direction you want to. There is a 360 move that you can do. And lastly, there's a charge attack you could do. Your legions can unlock different attacks as well, and they have the same ones as your character except for a charge attack. Now, I'll admit, I don't know if it's my issue or what, but some of these moves are kind of difficult to pull off. The 360 moves for me are easy to come out and come out consistently, but when it comes to the thrust attack, it doesn't come out that often, especially if I'm doing back forward. If I do left right or right left, it seems to come out more consistently, but for some reason back forward doesn't. Now, I could be my controller, but I highly doubt that. But I will say with enough practice, it has came out more often than not, so maybe it's just my skills, but it is kind of weird that it just feels like it's not coming out as it should. The legions, like I said, can do these attacks as well. Now, when it comes to the legion, their thrust attack, unlike the player's thrust attack, is more of an uppercut typically. And with them, it's very awkward to pull off. But like I said, with enough skill and practice, you'll get used to how it feels in this game compared to others. Now, another big part of combat is sync attacks. Sync attacks are kind of like finisher moves or even counters that can come out anytime the player is in a certain position during a combo or being attacked a certain way or even during a dodge move. Sync attacks are available anytime you see a blue flash highlight on the screen, followed by a sound effect. The hardest one to pull off is called a perfect call. Basically, what you want to do is call your legion out as soon as you're about to get hit. This will give you invisibility frames and do a very heavy hitting attack. Each combo also ends with a particular sync attack as well. Now, the cool thing about these sync attacks, and also something that'll be a big learning curve for many people, including myself when I was playing, is that each legion, depending upon what combo you're doing and what legion you're using, it will change the type of sync attack. There's another thing that changes the sync attacks as well, and that's your weapons, as you have 3 different types. You have your X-Baton, which is more for melee speedy attacks, your Blaster, which is for range attacks, and your Gladius weapon, which is for heavy hitting attacks, but they're quite slow, and they're mostly used for breaking shields or breaking enemy guards. So what happens is you have 5 different legions and 3 different weapons. Each weapon has basically the same combo string, although the Gladius sword and the Blaster has a few less button inputs needed, but all you do is press the same attack button over and over. So it's not like you got to learn different strings of button combinations. So even a casual player will be able to understand how this works. What you need to remember is the animations that are applied to each weapon in each legion, because what can happen is you could be playing the game using your X-Baton and be accustomed to how your sword legion ends a sync attack, but you may be currently using your axe legion. So you have to remember what each legion does with each sync attack. Some sync attacks with some legion combinations work better in certain situations than others. So that's the mind game that this game plays on you. You have to make sure you remember what you have out at each time, which weapon you're using currently, and which sync attack ends which way. Like I said, the go-to sync attack is the perfect call and the perfect dodges. Now those typically end the same no matter what, with a invincibility frame attack, which will keep you safe. So even if it's something you don't want, you won't take damage from it. But plenty sync attacks don't give you invincibility frames. Invincibility frames are very important in this game because many enemies do not get flinched by attacks. You have to do so much damage before they actually get flinched by an attack that you might think that these enemies have a sponginess to them, but trust me, it's really not that way. Another big aspect of combat is customization and leveling up. So you're able to level up your Legion and your weapons. Matter of fact, when you level them up, that's how you unlock the new moves. But with your Legions, you're able to take it a step forward and customize them, adding different abilities and moves onto them that don't come from just leveling them up. There's also items you can equip with each Legion. At first, in the beginning, this doesn't seem that important. These different skills and items you can attach to each Legion. I'd advise you in the beginning just to experiment, but as you get closer to the late game, and especially the end game, this is where you want to really make a build for your character. This is why I say this game falls in the RPG genre for me, because these builds are important. These are not things you could just ignore if you want to get S+ rank, or if you want to just do well in higher challenging combat scenarios. And this is not a simplistic decision. It's not like you just go in and say, okay, just give me all the high level gear and the high level items to attach to my Legion. No, you want to strategize and pick the perfect setup depending upon what you want to do. Keep in mind, you have 5 different Legions that you can call out and use interchangeably through combat. And each Legion, because you can attach different things on them, when you call one out, you may be swapping out different skills and abilities. So you have to remember what you have set for each Legion. That's why I said you don't want to just mix and match and put whatever you want on each Legion, because when you're in combat and things get sticky, you want to make sure you know, I'm calling out a Legion that has a lot of attack damage, or maybe I need defense, so let me call out a Legion that I put a lot of defense skills on. Maybe there's some type of enemy with elemental damage. Maybe I need to call out my Legion that I have all my fire defense against. It just depends on the situation and the scenario you have. For me, now that I'm in the end game doing all the end game challenges, I'm actually currently using my Sword Legion a lot more, and throughout the entire game I've had an extension on my Astral Chain with a certain skill. It's been hard for me to get rid of this skill because although this skill may not seem important, it is to me, because I've become so used to how long the chain is now that when I call out my Sword Legion, I know that I have a long chain and that Legion can wrap up multiple enemies easier compared to the other ones. This level of customization is very deep, and it also adds to the overall feel of how this hack and slash game is different than others. As Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, and other games in the genre feel like games that is all about being heavy on the combos and heavy on just being very good at twitch reflexes, Astral Chain does feel that way, but it also feels more tactical than any other action hack and slash game I've ever played. That's due to most enemies having some type of armor around them. Now, what I mean by armor, I mean kind of like hyper armor or something like that. So that means when you attack an enemy, they don't automatically flinch. As you level up and get stronger, yes, this will become less, so you can attack less and get them to flinch more often. But still, even in in-game, you will be fighting enemies and doing damage to them, and they don't flinch out of their combo or stop what they're doing. But this doesn't make them feel like sponges, so there's just strategy around to make them flinch. Charged up attacks normally knock them out of their guard state, or using your Gladius sword also does the trick. And each Legion also has moves that definitely can knock the enemy into a flinch state, but you have to figure out which move that is. So it's best to, again, go to training and just study up on each enemy type and how they react to different moves and combos. The learning curve for this combat system is high, and I think that's very refreshing, as like I said, most action RPGs or hack and slash games have a universal control system and a universal way they play. So you can go from one game to another, even made by different developers, and for the most part, you'll know exactly what to do. But Astral Chain is so different than other games in the genre, it's actually like learning an entirely new experience, which for someone who's been playing games for over 20 years is very refreshing. Now let's get into Astral Chain's other gameplay mechanics. That's the exploration and detective work. Now the iris is used in many situations, but you'll mostly be using it for detective work. It's essentially Witcher vision or detective vision, commonly found in most games, but the iris is actually slightly unique in Astral Chain. As you play through the game, the iris will level up and you're able to see more details on characters, and some side quests can become easier and detective work become easier because it gives you so much information on who you're scanning. The iris in combat can also display the enemy's health bar as well. These levels aren't big, but they're crammed with a bunch of different small little areas you can go into and discoveries you can find. Think something as small as a puddle but big as an ocean. There are tons of secrets and areas you can't access because you need certain legions that you unlock throughout the story to get. So this game definitely has a lot of replay value. Remember I brought up jumping and jumping attacks. Well, like I said, even in exploration, you can use this move as well. So there are times where you might need an item or want an item but can't figure out how to get to it. And the best thing to do is to let your legion go there and then jump over there using your legion and your leash. That's not all. Each legion's special ability is used in exploration as well. So for example, you might have a situation where you need to dispose a bomb and you need to cut some wires. So you use your sword legion to cut the different wires, as sword legion can cut energy lines as well as other physical lines as well. The beast legion works as a police dog and can dig up holes and even track different enemies and different items you need. There's actually plenty of sections where you have to let the beast legion smell things out and then track down a person. It's pretty cool actually. The arrow legion can shoot these glowing orbs that you'll see throughout the map, which will allow you to collect items that you can't reach. And there are different mini games that you can play that require you use your arrow legion, so you'll be able to have like a shooting gallery mini game from time to time. The axe legion is actually pretty interesting. Throughout the game, you will be tasked to defend different civilians. And because you get the Axe Legion late in the game, you won't even know until you replay levels that the Axe Legion can do this. So in the beginning, when you have to defend civilians from enemies, you basically just want to quickly dispose of them as fast as possible. But when you get your Axe Legion, you can send the Axe Legion over to different NPCs and different civilians to directly guard them. But this will make the Axe Legion basically useless for you. There are certain things that the Axe Legion can only open, such as doors and certain blocks that the Axe Legion can only destroy, so that comes in handy as well. The Arm Legion might be one of the most versatile when it comes to exploration and combat, as you could pick stuff up in the area to throw at enemies and even pick up things to just destroy, because a lot of times when you destroy these things like trash cans, boxes, crates, whatever they may be, there's items in it. So even if there's not an enemy around to throw it at, you might want to destroy them anyway, because it might drop some meds or some type of item you can use later on. There's also doors that the Arm Legion can open only, so you'll need it for that as well. And there are plenty of times where the floor may have hazardous things on the bottom of it, such as sticky goop or fire. And because you can hover inside of the Arm Legion, you will be pretty much invulnerable to these things. The Arm Legion also can be used to move items around. So there are plenty of different puzzles and situations where you need to move blocks that are too heavy for your player to move around, so you use your Arm Legion to move them. Something that I forgot to mention, but it kind of blends in exploration and combat, is how in boss fights and certain set pieces, you'll use your Legion to jump around different areas. So in most games, you'll have a quick time event, but in this game, it's all real time. So imagine you're in a situation where the floor is breaking or you need to quickly get to a new area. Well, instead of just having to do a quick time event, you'll actually have to guide your Legion to a safe place for you to be so you can hop across to a safe area. This is very different than most games, like I said, because other games use quick time events, and it puts you in a position to be quick on your feet, so you can go from combat to now you're in this mode where you have to think, okay, now I need to hop and get across to a new area. But because again, there is no dedicated jump button, it's all about guiding your Legion to a particular platform to then bring yourself over. These situations can be very intense, and like I said, it's just enough of a twist on something we do in every other game, which is jumping and platforming, but it's made unique here because not only do you have to worry about the position of your Legion, because there are plenty of times where I thought my Legion was in a good position to bring myself over, but I end up falling. So what you want to make sure is under each Legion, as you float them over to the new area, there's a icon letting you know, hey, okay, it's safe to bring them over. That's underneath the bottom of each Legion. But in the heat of things, you're trying to move quick, you might miss it and you'll fall. So as you play the game, you'll get used to it. And like I said, for a lot of people, they may not like this idea of having to learn how to play a game all over again. But for me, this was very refreshing, very needed for myself, because like I said, it comes to a point where you play so many games that all have the same mechanics and work the same way, that everything just becomes mundane, everything becomes typical. And Astral Chain really just broke all those stereotypical gameplay designs, but they did not do it in a way that made it feel clunky or unnatural. Speaking of the unique abilities you could do in exploration, there are plenty of times you can also use the combat abilities in exploration as well. So remember I told you that you can bind up enemies to stick them in place. Well, there are sometimes you have to fight different civilians or deal with people that don't have superpowers. Remember, in this game, you are a cop. So that's one part that this game just nails, is that the cop aspect is all throughout the game. So let's go over some of that. With the binding situation, let's say there's a guy that's on the run, and there are plenty of side objectives where people are running away from you as you're an officer trying to arrest them. You're supposed to use your Legion to bind them up so that it's essentially like making an arrest. There's also scenarios where people need saving, and you need to bind up the person you saved to bring them over towards you. And the cool thing about this is that, again, in most games, these would be quick time events or contextual button presses. And there was a point where I needed to save a fellow officer, and I forgot that you could wrap them up to bring them to you. So I was sitting there wondering, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm like waiting for a button to pop up on the screen. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? And then I think Platinum Games realized that you might have forgotten, because this was later in the game. And the NPC, the character, was like, hey man, you could just wrap your Legion around me and bring me closer to you. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. So I forgot all about that. I just think stuff like that is cool. And I do think it's wise and smart of Platinum to remind players, because like I said, you can get in this loop of just being accustomed to how everything plays everywhere else, you'll forget. Feeding into the immersion of being a cop, there are a lot of small things you could do as well in the game that you would expect and hope a police officer would do in real life. So there are certain levels where there'll be litter all over the ground, cups and cans and different trash, and you can actually pick this stuff up and throw it in the trash can. I know that may seem like pointless, or why in the world would you want to do that, but it actually gives you extra points for your in-game ranking. And I just find it fun. I find it fun that you're just, the game doesn't tell you any stuff. It doesn't like say, hey, you should probably pick this stuff up. It's like you're walking the streets and you see this stuff. It says, you could pick up the item. It's a can. It's like, why would I want this? And if you happen upon a trash can, it's like, oh, I can throw this in here, and you just get all these points. And I just thought that it's that little detail. It's those little things that developers stopped adding in games long ago, because there's so much focus on big budget presentation and big budget graphics, that the small little things that make something feel lived in and real or special get left out. There's other things you could do by being a cop is, sometimes civilians get lost. You can use the environmental clues to bring them back to places they need to be. There was a quest I did where a kid, he had some ice cream, the ice cream fell, and you had to go get him some more ice cream. And I was shocked by this, that when you went to go get the ice cream, it started this like balance mini game. So now you have to walk with the ice cream, and the ice cream's like tipping over and stuff. And I wasn't even expecting them to have stuff like this in it. It's just these small little extra gameplay moments that added to the entire experience of being a police officer, and for the most part being a decent one too. There's another small detail as well. As you're a police officer, you need to abide by the law. So there are times where I was playing the game and I would actually smash into a bunch of boxes that seem useless, and then my points would get deducted. And if I was around a fellow officer, they would kind of complain at me, and I didn't know why. And it was because technically I'm destroying public property, and I wasn't realizing that's what I was doing. If you jaywalk in the game, you'll get penalized as well, and you can even possibly get hit by a car. Nothing crazy happens, your character jukes out the way, but it's still funny that attention to detail is in the game. Now, what's being a cop without also being a detective? Yes, Astral Chain's second biggest portion that's in its gameplay is the detective work, and this is very fun. So in most levels, you'll have to do minor detective work. This involves you talking to different NPCs, or even using your Legion to eavesdrop on certain people to get information, and this information is in the form of keywords. So you'll get different keywords that you'll use to deduce the reason why something is happening, why a crime took place, or why the chimeras are attacking, or whatever the case may be. And the game has like a quiz like mini game where you piece these things together, and once you piece everything together, you're rewarded on how much you got correct. There's also a bonus that I didn't know about, that if you already know like the certain words you need and only get those words and don't get other extra tidbits that you don't need that go to the case, you get a bonus score. So that's something to keep in mind if anyone's trying to get S rank or S plus rank, because I went back to replay missions and I'm like, why in the world am I getting an S plus rank on this detective work? I got all the answers right the first time, and it's because there's a bonus for only getting the right keywords you need and not getting any extra ones. And it's not as simple as you think it is. You might say, okay, I talked to a couple of NPCs, I get these keywords, but the way the questions are formed, at least to me, they're not formed in a way to confuse you, but they may be formed in a way that you heard the information. Like the very first time you had to do the detective work, I was asked exactly why was a chimera in the region, what were they doing? And I was kind of confused on that question because the information I got wasn't given in a way that someone said the chimera came here to do this or that. It would just said the chimera came and did this. So that's what they were asking me. So I was kind of confused and I chose the wrong answer. But once you hear the right answer, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So it's not going to be as simple as you heard the keyword, so will it be recalled back to you. It's not that simple. So there is some thinking involved. And again, it requires you to talk to all NPCs. That's something I would tell you to do, period, because all throughout this game, there are plenty of NPCs and even side quests that you wouldn't even know were side quests, or that you may have missed because you just didn't talk to enough people. So talk to all the NPCs, and not only will this feed into the detective work, but like I said, it'll feed into the side quests, and it just give you more replay value. Like I said, they got very creative with the gimmick of being a cop. There's other mini games I didn't mention or go into great detail that I will now. There was a mini game I played that I was actually stuck on for a while, where you have to move these damaged cars out of the way of traffic, and you'll sit there kind of stumped, wondering, okay, what is the proper position I need to move these cars in? And I was actually there for quite a bit trying to figure these out. There's another cop, a part of your entire group, that's always practicing his shots. So you'll find him sometimes throughout different missions, and you can have like a shooting gallery challenge with him and try to beat his high score. There's another spin on the balance gimmick where you have to help a fellow police officer move some boxes. You do this a couple of times throughout the game. And you know what's funny now that I think about it? Did Astral Chain do the gimmick of like balancing yourself while moving before Death Stranding? I don't know. That's something to think about. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if Kojima looked at Astral Chain at any point when he was developing Death Stranding. And another big part of being a cop sometimes is you gotta be a little sneaky. Now, the sneaking mechanics and the stealth missions are a little interesting. I know many gamers can't stand where they just throw in these stealth sections in games, because a lot of times, I'll admit, they are kind of like half-baked. They just throw them in, kind of like if you ever played Spider-Man PS4 with the Mary J missions or the Miles missions, where the game really wasn't designed behind that type of stuff, and it's not that interesting. But luckily, Astral Chain is a bit different. There is a learning curve to Astral Chain stealth mechanics. For one, the crouch button and the run button is the same button. Now, again, if this was a stealth based game and that was the main gameplay, this would be very dumb. But because this is not that type of game, it's not that big of a deal, and it's just something you have to get used to. The reason why it's a little annoying though is because the run button being the same button as the stealth button, which is you clicking in the analog stick, you can imagine you'll run in a stealth section when you don't want to. The only other negative I could think of in these stealth sections is how you take out different enemies. So basically what you want to do is, if you get close enough behind an enemy, you will get a button prompt to bind the enemy automatically. You technically don't have to do that. You could have your Legion out and have them wrap themselves around the enemy, but this could cause an alarm to be raised, but it's very slow. So typically, if you know what you're doing and you do it quick enough, it won't be a problem for you. The issue with doing the button prompt bind move is that your character stands up. Why they make them stand up, I do not know, but they stand up when they do this, which means if you do this bind move and you think you're safe from anyone seeing you, well, you might be, but if you end up standing up right afterwards, now you're seen and now you're caught, and that could be annoying. So you just have to be extra careful when you do this. But these stealth sections are fun. There's a lot of things to explore and discover while you're in them, and you'll want to move around and find secrets. But because, of course, you're trying to be stealthy, it's best to take out all the enemies before you really just explore this area. Again, because of its unique controls and the unique usage of the different legions when you're using this mode, I had to kind of relearn how stealth mechanics work. Again, this isn't Metal Gear Solid 5. This isn't the greatest stealth game ever made, but due to Astral Chain's unique gimmicks, you do need to learn how to do this over again. And that to me was fun. It made the experience much different than any other game that just throws in a stealth mechanic. And I feel that if they worked on this more, like if there was an Astral Chain 2, this may be a bigger part of the experience than what was given here. Now, something you'll be doing throughout the game is collecting. You'll be collecting items that you can use in combat, such as bombs and grenades. You'll be collecting health items, but the main collectible you'll be getting is Red Shift. Now, without getting into the story purposes of what Red Shift is, but Red Shift is basically like a collectible that will give your Legion extra energy, and you can also use it to increase your overall ranking and score. This stuff is everywhere, and there's even times where they might be in combat arenas, and you'll want to try to collect it while not getting hit by an enemy, as sometimes if you beat a combat area and then it throws you out of it, you can't collect it anymore. So you want to try to go for 100% if you can, but for most levels, you only need about 80 or 70% of it to get cleaned up. This again feeds back into being a cop. All these small little things that, well, cops in real life don't clean up Red Shift, but you get what I'm saying. All these small things that a cop would do or should be doing, cleaning up litter, stopping crime, helping children get places they need to go. I think one quest, it was a short one. I had to get a balloon for a kid. All that small stuff just adds to the overall experience. There are other quests you could do as well involving your camera. You will unlock an in-game camera shortly throughout the story, and you could use this camera to take pictures of not only NPCs and get background detail, but you could take pictures of enemies and get background details on them as well, giving you little small hints on the best way to deal with them in combat. There are also different quests where you may have to take a picture of a certain location. There's an NPC that I did a quest for where she's all into ghosts and stuff like that. She was asking me to recreate different scenes that she found through films. So that was kind of cool. But now that I'm thinking about it, there might be quests I missed, but I'm surprised that you didn't use the camera that often, seeing as you're a detective, and detectives do use cameras to take pictures of different crime scenes and stuff like that. But that may just be quests I missed or I didn't see or notice, but I did play a few quests that utilized the camera. But overall, the camera will be used for things like taking just random pictures of things, or there's these things called operations that I'll go over in a minute where the camera is used quite a bit. And the camera, it works like any other in-game camera. You can take pictures of yourself. And one thing that's cool is you can actually give the camera to your Legion. So you can have the Legion take pictures of you. You could take pictures of the Legion, you could do a selfie, so on and so forth. You've had photo mode in many different games, so I'm pretty sure you guys are used to it by now. Now, like I said, a lot of the side quests involve being a cop, but there are some that don't. So you might have a side quest where a guy's like, hey, I have interest in this woman. Can you help me find out what's a way to woo her? Or someone might have forgot their lunch and can you deliver their lunch for them? So not all quests involve something that a cop will do, but most of them are like that. But the quests that don't, I find to be more comedic. So if you're looking for a laugh, like I said, search out and look for all the quests, all the side quests. And like I said, all the ones that don't involve cop work are typically funny and, kind of more for mood change, if you will. Now, I brought up these things called operations. Operations are like mini challenges that you could do that I didn't even realize was in the game until probably like the 3rd chapter. When you go on your menu, you'll see hundreds of operations that you could do. These are basically like mini challenges. You could think of them like trophies or achievements, but not exactly. It's a Nintendo Switch game, but it's kind of the similar concept. You complete this different task and you get a reward for it. The rewards vary from different types of items to cosmetic items and even abilities you can attach on your Legion. You can even unlock different photo options and for photo mode. So you might want to complete these to get different items that you have interest in, but definitely do them to help you level up your Legion and get different skills. It's probably the easiest way to do it. And some of these challenges are just fun to me. So a lot of the photo ones, like they'll say, hey, take a picture of this character doing this certain thing, and you'll wonder, well, when will I have this opportunity? And sometimes this will require you to replay missions because maybe you missed out on the opportunity, or it requires you to just keep an eye out on certain scenarios and situations that you wouldn't think to take a picture of. Or maybe there's an operation that has something to do with combat, fight a certain amount of enemies, use a certain weapon so many times, use this particular Legion so many times, bind so many enemies up. It just depends on what the situation is. But the ones I enjoyed the most had to do with photo mode, because the other ones you'll probably just end up doing by playing the game anyway. Like you're going to use your X baton so many times anyway. You're going to, use your Legion so many times anyway. And now that I'm in the end game, I'm going for S+ ranks. Speaking of end game, this is all about doing extra challenges. So you have all these different challenges you unlock later in the game. So far, the ones I've gotten just have to do with combat scenarios, and at first they were easy. I was like, okay, this is fun and all, but this isn't really that challenging. But I just played one the other day where I had to fight a bunch of, well, I'm not gonna say because it's a spoiler, but you fight a certain particular enemy, and it's so many of them, and they do not let up. It was probably the hardest challenge I've experienced in the game, and it made me say, okay, I need to come back. I need to train up in the training mode more. Like I have to say this just to get off track a little bit. This is probably like the one game that's like in this hack and slash genre that I've played where I'm going to the training mode to train to like figure out how to play. I did that a bit in Bayonetta, but after a certain while in Bayonetta, like Bayonetta to me wasn't that difficult to get the hang of, because again, it plays mostly like your traditional hack and slash. I am constantly going back to training mode throughout my 30-hour playthrough. Like I was chapter 3, I'm going back to training mode. I'm in chapter 5, I'm going back to training mode, because I'm learning new things and I'm discovering new moves, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, where does this go in my combo? When do I use this move, use that move? And these extra in-game challenges will push you to the edge where you're going to sit there and say, okay, I know how to play this game, but clearly there's something I'm missing. And you might even feel like the game just was poor at teaching you these things, or it sucked, and it's not that. The game tells you you need to go to training mode and brush up on your skills, and when you do and come back, oh, you'll dominate. So that's one thing that I have to say is very unique about this game. I've never experienced that in a hack and slash. You play a fighting game, you train all the time. You'll play against an NPC, maybe you'll do a training match against a buddy online, but I've never sat there and said, okay, I really need to go back and train in Devil May Cry, because it comes a point where you just remember. This is not that. This is so many different technical aspects to this game where even if you remember, you got to get your skills down so you don't panic, and you get your skills down so you don't, you want to set things up properly. You got to know when to use the area effect attacks. You got to know when you need to pull your Legion back. You need to know when there's times where you need to switch Legions. It's just so many different ways that a situation can go that these in-game challenges will push you to mastering the combat. The last thing I'll cover is customization and a little bit about how the game feels from a story perspective, but I will not be going over story because I don't want to spoil it. So customization is very limited in the beginning. You're able to choose a male or female character. You can name your character whichever you want. And there's a certain amount of color palettes you could choose from. But as you play the game and you unlock different color palettes for each character, you can even change the skin of the character. Like you only have human skin at first, and you could just make your character the Hulk if you want to. You can make them all green, red, it doesn't matter. And all these different color palettes are unlocked through different challenges and different operations throughout the game. You can even customize your Legion's color palette as well. You can even make custom color palettes too. For your main character, you could put on different shades, masks, different outfits, and you unlock a lot of these things, like I said, in the end game with the in-game challenges. But throughout the main campaign, you'll be mostly unlocking minor cosmetic items and color palettes. Now, the overall feel of the game and the feel of the story, like I said, I don't want to spoil the story or get that much into it, but one thing I want to focus on is Neuron. So Neuron is the police force that you're a part of. They control the legions. And I want to say this is a small knit group, and each character does feel different. And that's pretty important to the overall feel of the game, because you're in this one police unit that's not made up of many different people, and they made sure to give them enough character individually so they all feel special. Probably the standout character is going to be Marie for most people, as she's the most charismatic of all the characters, and she also doesn't really do much fighting. She's kind of like the janitor or the team morale character. She kind of does both roles. And probably the biggest star of the game is Lappy. This is like the comic relief, and you'll be seeing Lappy throughout the entire game. And you know, there's funny situations that you'll catch Lappy in that you're like, oh my god, I didn't even know this character was going to be here at the time. And that's just the thing. All these small details is what made this experience so special to me. Like, you really do feel like you're in a special division of the police force. It's only a certain amount of you, and you get to learn all your fellow officers, even though you don't get to know any of them like in an extremely deep manner. Like, this isn't like Persona where you're going to do multiple quests and learn deep meaningful things about each character. But each character has like their gimmick, like their personality trait. Like, one character's into goals, one character's more energetic than another character, they love animals. Like I said, Marie, she's more of the happy-go-lucky team morale character. She even leaves you different notes in your computer system that you could check, and you know, her personality comes out through there. So you'll kind of grow like a not minute, but you know, you'll grow like a bond to these characters, if you will. You'll say, oh, okay, cool, like, you know, Marie left me a message, I'll read it because, you know, I like her personality. Or, you know, you'll be out on a mission and you'll see Avery acting energetic and hyper and gun-ho because that's her character. So you'll get to know each character. And you know, I liked all the cast, you know, personally. I didn't feel anyone was bad. I didn't feel anyone was just kind of in the way. And like I said, this added to the overall feel of the immersion of the game. So you really do feel like you're a part of this small team, and it's almost like you're in this small little family. Astral Chain is one of those special games that I think only will exist on a Nintendo platform. Not because Nintendo is special, it's just because I feel Nintendo, out of all developers, is more into the business of letting people create. Microsoft kind of does it sometimes, but not of lately. And Sony, they're so focused on big budget titles, they can't afford to let you be creative, because you know, the more money you spend, the more straight and narrow the game has to be. The more like we gotta hit as many audiences as possible, because we're spending millions. We're spending too much money to be creative. We might lose some people. So Nintendo providing this platform, providing the Switch, allow Platinum Games, in my opinion, to be as creative as possible. And this is just a special game. Is this game the greatest game ever made? No. Is this a game that I would say changed hack and slash genres? Well, I won't say it changed anything, because I don't know any of the game that's like Astral Chain, but I will say that this was an experiment that was successful. This was a game that said, hey, we got a vision, we got a gimmick, we got something we want to focus on, and they focused on it. You feel like a police officer, this legion that's attached to you by a chain. The chain is alive, the legion is alive. You feel a connection to everything they made. Nothing feels out of place. Even when the game throws a curveball at you through a mini game or through a side quest where you're like, that's kind of interesting that they spent this time to create just this small portion of this game that you only experience one time, really, but it added so much to the overall experience. You got to appreciate it. For those who don't know how development works, when developers decide to make a mini game or a sub game inside of a game, that sometimes can take just as much effort as the main game. Today's society, you know, with these big budget games, they can't really afford to do that. So for Platinum to be able to add that, what I would call 6th generation feel of playing a game, and there's a whole nother game inside the game, you know, that stuff was just, it just took me back. It took me back into a time where developers just seem to be creative in a way that just makes you feel like, hey, when they made this, I'm sure it was a headache at times, I'm sure it was difficult, but they had fun making this game. And sometimes when people have fun doing something, when they deliver it to you, the fun rubs off on you. It's kind of like when someone loves cooking and they put some love in the food, you can feel it when you eat it. And that's kind of what Platinum Games gave me. They had fun making it, and I had fun playing it. And that's why I think you should go out and get Astral Chain.